My team and I have reviewed literally thousands of sales calls, and over again we find the same thing, that when people make the right first impression, that the sales process becomes a whole lot easier. In fact, a recent client of ours, Kevin, actually shared with us how making some simple tweaks to the way he starts his calls actually helped him close a lot more sales and allowed him to open up his prospects where they felt a lot more comfortable talking to him throughout the sales process. And you can do this too. So before we get started, if you like this video, make sure to like it by clicking the little like button. If you want to be notified the next time we make a video, make sure to subscribe so you get the little notification bell in the corner. And of course, share this video with anyone that you think might find it valuable as well. Okay, so one of the most important things about starting a conversation when you're in a sales situation is to show up on time, whether it's on the phone or in person. If you've got an appointment to meet with somebody and you don't show up on time, well, I can pretty much guarantee you that the conversation is going to start with you apologizing for being late. Well, or at least it should, because you are late, in fact. So one of the things you want to do to start the conversation off right is to always show up on time for any of your sales conversations. So that's really going to be key. And then the very first thing you're going to want to do is build rapport. Now, I want to talk a little bit about rapport because the higher your price point, the more sophisticated your buyer, the less time you're going to want to spend building rapport. And in fact, in general, a lot of people who are selling in the lower ticket space, you can really actually make the sale on rapport alone. You can rapport sell, you can build that relationship, you can get somebody to like you. There's not a lot of risk because your price point is low, and so they'll buy just because they like you. But as you get into more sophisticated buying process, more sophisticated buyers, and especially higher price points, all of a sudden that rapport is not going to be enough. You're not going to be able to rapport sell, and you don't want to spend a ton of time in that rapport section because the reality is that they want to get down to business. So spend a couple minutes building rapport in whatever way feels most natural for you. I typically like to ask, hey, I'm usually doing phone sales, so I like to ask, so hey, I see you've got a 209 area code. Where in the world is that? And then they'll tell me where it is. I'm like, oh, okay, great. And is that where you're from originally, or did you just move there? And those would be the two questions that I'll ask, and then I'm going to dive right into the actual conversation. So, and you're going to want to pay attention. One of the key components of sales is actually being present with the person that you're talking with and what they're saying, not just in words, but in body language or in tone, or in just confidence in their voice, all of those kinds of things. So make sure that you're really paying attention, and this will actually matter more here in the next step. But the key thing is to make sure that you are present with the person you're talking to, and if they seem like they're really wanting to get down to business, then get down to business. If there's somebody that really seems like they're enjoying just sort of building rapport and chatting away, then you're still going to want to move the conversation forward, especially if you're in a more sophisticated sale or a higher price point. But go ahead and acknowledge that person, make sure that you're staying present with them, and then skillfully move the conversation forward. And one of the skills that makes this a lot easier is the next step of mirror and matching. And this isn't really about being inauthentic in any way, but the best example I can give of this is if you get on the phone with somebody and they jump on and they're like, oh, hey, how are you? I'm really excited to talk with you about this today. And they're super high energy and they're going like that. And then you show up and you're like, hi, great. So yeah, I'm gonna have some questions for you today. Right? You might just watching that video and be like, oh my gosh, how do I fast forward here, right? And so if you're going very slow and methodical and they're very high energy and fast paced, then you're gonna need to speed up and get in line with them. And the same is true in the opposite. If you're typically very high energy and very fast paced and you're talking to someone that's a much more methodical, slower paced thinker, the last thing that you want to do is come off as the fast talking salesperson. So make sure that you're paying attention to the cues that your prospect will give you and that you are getting in line with them and congruent with them, because it's going to allow for the energy to flow back and forth if you're in the sort of same energy that them, whether that be speed of voice, that be how loud you're talking, talking. You'll notice different cues, even things like they may be somebody who says, well, I typically feel like this, or I typically see this, right? Do they use feeling words? Do they use seeing words, sound? Like what senses do they use to describe what they're saying? So pay attention to those kinds of cues because they're going to help you communicate better with your prospect. And the more in line you can be with them, the more likely that they're going to be to buy from you. So always make sure to mirror and match. The other thing to really keep in mind whenever you're on a sales call is that the person asking the questions is really the one leading the call. And a lot of new salespeople have a tendency to think, oh, well, they're asking me lots of questions. They're really interested, so I'll just keep answering their questions. Well, the problem is that if they're leading the conversation, then they're going to lead it to an end where they decide to get everything they need, get off the phone, and make a decision later. And if you're really wanting to get them to make that decision on the call, then the best thing that you can do is be a leader on the call. So the person asking the questions is the one taking the lead. So if they've got questions, that's great. Let them know, hey, I'm going to get to all of that, and make sure as I'm going, if you come up with questions, write them down. But before I get to exactly the steps that we're going to take to help you solve your problem and work together, I want to make sure that I understand your problem fully, because there's a couple of reasons, right? One is, can I actually help you? And two is, in order for me to know what those exact steps to help your specific situation are going to be, are going to vary depending on exactly what your situation is. So I need to make sure and understand it. Now, even if you do the same thing with every single client, it's really important that the person you're talking to feels heard. And the best way for them to feel heard is to ask good questions and make sure you understand their situation from all angles. And we've talked about this using the DCQC process that we talk about in other videos. So once you've kind of gotten in that space, you've built the rapport, you've shown up on time, you've framed the call, you've taken the lead, you're the one asking the questions. You want to make sure before you go into the bulk of the call that you help them understand the agenda for why you're on the call today. So we call this framing the call. So you want to make sure that you frame the call for them so that they understand. Now, here's an example of how you want to frame the call. First, you've built a little bit of rapport, and now you're ready to transition into the actual call. So you'll say something like, okay, so here's how we're going to work this today. I want to ask you a lot of questions. I want to understand exactly what's going on with you, where you're at now, where you want to be, and what the gap is between where you are today and where you want to be. Now, if I can help you bridge that gap, I'll share with you exactly what that looks like. But no matter what, my goal today is to get a real understanding of what's going on for you and help you get some clarity on exactly what your next steps are in order for you to succeed. And if it's not something I can help you with, I'll make sure to point you in the right direction as well. How does that sound? And usually they're going to say, oh, that sounds great. And then the final piece of this is you should be recording every one of your sales calls. So especially if you're doing phone conversations, you want to make sure to record those sales calls. And in order to do that in most states, you need to make sure and inform the person that you're talking to that you're intending to record the call. So one of the things that you want to do, though, is be very careful, because what some people will do is they'll go, and this goes back to the other videos where I've talked about conviction, right? You don't want to waffle. You don't want to say something like, hey, so is it okay if I record the call? Because if you say it just like that and you ask that question, then they're going to stop and they're going to go, oh, I don't know. Let me think about that. And now they're thinking about it and they're going, well, I'd rather you didn't. Almost everyone will say that if you ask that question. But if you do it this way, you'll out of 1,000 calls, you'll maybe get one person that says something. So you just say, hey, just so you know, for training purposes, I do record every one of these calls. So with that said, let's just dive in. And why don't you tell me? And then you ask your first question, whatever that is. And of course, in a previous video, we talked about writing your sales script. And so hopefully you've got that first question already figured out, but you just go straight into that first question. So that's the process. You want to make sure that you show up on time, that you build rapport, that you mirror and match. You always want to make sure that you take the lead in the sales call, because the person taking the lead and asking the questions is the one that's actually kind of leading the call and in charge of the call and where the call is going to go. You want to make sure that you frame the call, and of course you want to make sure that you let them know that you are recording the call. So if you found this video helpful, make sure to like the video. If you think there's somebody else that might find it helpful, go ahead and share it. And of course, if you want to be notified every time a new video becomes available, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you get notified by the little notification bell in the corner. And if you want to improve your sales, step one is to figure out what you're doing wrong. And you can do that by submitting a free call review to an expert on our team by clicking the link in the description box below this video.